Hey guys, what's up? Itchla. And today I'm coming back with another episode of Car Rides Witchla. And I don't know what I was thinking about today. What I accidentally just did, and I didn't even know this was possible, when I shifted in the manual, I shifted straight into second. And it did it. And then the car didn't move. Kind of an interesting response, right? I don't know. I didn't think that would happen or that it would lock it, but maybe I don't know, it's kind of strange. It didn't move when I took my foot off the gas. I was confused cuz I would have thought shifting it would have just done nothing. But it did do something. It did that. Right. So I don't know if I did press on the throttle, if it would have actually done anything, but doesn't really matter. Don't really care. What I was thinking about today is how bad people are at arguing in general nowadays. And I think one of the main reasons for that is that a lot of people, first of all, probably think highly of themselves when it comes to arguing. And a lot of people, when they argue, they treat it as this ego thing and this emotional thing and this people get too emotional about it. It's actually kind of shocking to me just how emotional people get about arguing. Because when I argue or when I get into arguments, I don't usually think that emotionally. I just kind of adhere to facts. If I don't know something, I usually don't push it. But I notice a lot of people, when I have a claim that I know is true and I know is correct, because again, I usually only say something if I know it's the case. That's the only reason why I'll say something. But I notice other people don't do that. Other people will just blurt stuff out. And they'll also blurt out that what I said was wrong when it's not, and I know that it's not. And I think an issue happens for people who don't frequently think they're wrong in an argument. I purposely think it's important to know and be aware of when you're wrong, because that's really how you grow to become a better debater, a better arguer. You can't get anywhere if you always think you're right. You're just probably not going to be a good debater, because being a good debater is really it's all about defense, man. I mean, even if you can't cut into the other person directly, as long as you can refute what the other person says, that's all there really is to it. And then eventually you're going to crack their wall down just by stamina. So that's kind of, I guess, my style of debating. It always wins because I always have more stamina than other people when it comes to communication. And I'm also incredibly good at defense. I'm also good at striking too. The thing is, I don't think I was always this way. I feel like when I was younger, I probably thought that I was a good debater, but in reality, I was not. Hold on, I'm just losing my mind real quick. I mean, I know I have my phone, but what did I do with it? Wow. I'm super confused right now. Oh, I put my phones in these pouches and I put it in the wrong pouch. I'll have to explain that they're just these drawstring pouches that are exactly kind of the size of a phone, so it works. It's just this little quirk I do because I don't utilize a case. So yeah, I mean, a lot of people, I think that happens too. So when people argue, they run out of stamina. And a lot of people are ill-equipped to debate and to argue. So you have to remember when I'm coming at them with sources for the information, a lot of times people don't know what to do because they don't have a source and they might have thought it wouldn't have gone on that long or something. I think it's odd, and I guess that's why I have a different take on it, because I see conversations, arguments, disagreements as an education, something to learn from. I don't see what ego is in it, and I guess I'm not really realizing just how ego-centered most people are when it comes to those sorts of things. I don't know. I just didn't think it was that dramatic, or like people were really that emotional. But that seems to be the gist of it. And that's why you can't really win. I mean, even I'm saying like how you win an argument is being on the defense. I'm sure there's plenty of people who argue with me and act like they've won. Because that's the whole, I mean, you can't even convince people, right? That's like the ultimate thing, is a lot of people aren't thinking objectively or outside of the situation. So who knows? Maybe some people would just never want to admit it just because they just don't want to admit it. I mean, why should they? It's not really within a human self-interest. Well, actually it is, but I guess that's a difference between short-term and long-term thinking, because in the long term, if you admit you're wrong in an argument, well, actually, no. I guess you could admit you could just what could happen, and I wonder if people do this. I don't know why I haven't thought of it before. Is you could lose an argument, but understand that you lost it, but not admit to it. Right? That's easily something I think a lot of people might do. I can't believe I didn't think of that before. But yes, essentially, you could argue with somebody and know you lost, but it's still not really in your best interest to admit it, I suppose. But yeah, I think I was pretty bad at debating. I think when I was younger, I had the capacity to debate well, but maybe I did too much goofy debating, but I guess there were moments where I thought I was good at it. But in general, I think a lot of my argument construction didn't land, or it was for points that were a little bit too difficult to prove. Like I guess I was on hard mode on purpose because I was a teenager or whatever. But no, I do think now I have quite a lot of I've retained so when I was a teenager, I would win arguments due to stamina. You know, nobody else I knew would even want to argue as long or could. It was always stamina, and I think it still is the case. I still think even in general, I just think people get drained and way too emotional, and I can be emotional too, but I can also be detached from it. I think that is a very important, like, if I'm emotional, that doesn't overwhelm I don't succumb to that. I can still process a situation objectively and externally, right? I can still process a situation outside of my body, even if I am emotional. I think I can detach from it, and I guess a lot of people can't detach from their situation, which granted is not in the survival sense, even that great of a skill, right? Because technically you would not want to be able to detach. Although, I think a lot of people do end up detaching, just not in productive ways. I think that's really the big thing. It's not productive detachment. Because there's a huge difference between, I think it's interesting because I recently heard this, and I guess I've been thinking about it. I haven't thought about talking about it on the show per se, but I have thought about it quite a bit. And a lot of religious people tend to make this argument, and I heard it a lot more when I was younger, but now I don't hear it quite as much because I do think things have shifted, is that people are not religious anymore because they are very well educated. They don't feel like they need God. They feel like they're smarter than God. They have the internet as a resource, so now you don't need to trust in God anymore. And I've heard that from older people. It was like, oh, you go to college and now you're an atheist because you're smart and you're educated. Now, that may have been the case for a period of time, but we're totally past that stage. Now the reason why people are atheists is because they're not educated, but they're not in tune with their soul, and we have constant noise, a constant ability to overwhelm all senses and just be totally disconnected from the soul. So a lot of people have anxiety, they have depression, they have these problems, but they don't ever have to come to terms with it. They could be lonely, but they don't have to come to terms with it. Because instead of having to think and realize your flaws and work on them, you can always have a screen in front of your face. You can always have headphones on. You can sleep to shows. You can sleep to music and essentially constantly have noise to drown out your own thoughts instead of actually fixing them, instead of actually doing anything about it or working on systems. I don't think my generation is particularly well educated. That may have peaked with millennials, but there has been such a shift where atheism now is a totally different. I don't think it's as respectable. I think intellectual atheism versus ignorant atheism is like just such a crazy difference. And you know what? I think in some ways with our generation we've seen the same on the other way too. We've seen people who are religious but perhaps more blindly religious, having a blind faith because of the uncertainty and confusion in the world. People don't know what to do. So some people are turning to religion, more so than previous gens. That's why Gen Z is all over the place. But I think the root is that no, I don't think we're uneducated, and I think that just was this thing that people had thought. But it's not, I don't think people are that educated now. I think education really went out the window at some point. I'm not entirely sure what happened, but I don't know. Am I wrong in saying that? Are people smarter now? Are people more knowledgeable now? Because I don't believe it. To me, it doesn't seem that way. And I think short form content kind of proves that. I mean, they're talking about how in order to make progress, you need to be specialized in science. That's what's happened. General knowledge is not particularly relevant anymore. It's people who make scientific breakthroughs they have to be specialized and it takes time. It's not like before where you just had Albert Einstein, this great guy, everybody knows him, who made certain discoveries. Now we're so far downstream that the other things to figure out may require a lifetime of one person studying one thing, where I am not seeing in a broad way people operating in that way. And I think you could have a lot of potential minds out there that are destroyed because with the reduction in attention span, they're not going to be able to do what is needed now, which honestly, what is needed at this stage is people who can focus for long periods of time and do that, you know, and figure out like the deeper things that we don't yet understand. And so when you have a generation where college is inaccessible, people's minds are fried, what does that do for our future? It's showing sluggishness. It's showing that things are not really moving in that forward of a direction, and it's very sad. I think there's just so much lost talent and potential. I still think I'm an example of that. Regardless of where I end up, I could have been better off if I started sooner. But I started so late, mainly due to society's own neglect of things. And I know we've been wrestling with this thought for a while of the nature versus nurture. We've been talking about it on here for a while, but I just think there are fundamental societal issues where people are just not given opportunities to do things. I mean, you could make the argument that people are just being filtered completely, you know? And so the people who don't make it, they don't deserve it anyway. I don't know if that's really the right way to look at it, though, because I guess you do have certain overachievers in America. There is a certain percentage not like me. Obviously, I don't know, I didn't really do the right things by myself until relatively, once I got into my 20s, which is, you really kind of need to be on the ball in your teens. And there are some people who are, but I think it's dangerous to be that laissez-faire about it. You really, having structure and kind of ensuring more people are at their best, I think is a minimal strain on society with pretty maximal differences. Although if we have to conclude that that's kind of the design that is being proposed, which the design is this idea that they're letting society be parasitic because that's just. And I think I've talked about that before. I'm honestly assuming that's what the way a lot of the billionaires justify the things they do is because they probably think if somebody can be they probably look at it as some kind of ecosystem thing where like worms are eaten by birds and then a bird's eaten by a fox and then, you know what I'm saying? Or like, that's not really a great example. A robin eats a bird, a hawk eats a robin. I have a feeling that's how a lot of the billionaire class justifies it morally. Which I don't know. It could have merit to it, but it's still an uncomfortable idea. I mean, it's something worth talking about. It's not just like, oh yeah, no, what we're doing's fine, which I'm assuming that's kind of what the thought is, or the justification. And it's not, I don't think it's overly irrational. It's just that, again, the idea would be that humans are really above that and we don't have to think in an ecosystem. I guess it gets complicated though, because then you have the argument that now people exist who wouldn't have otherwise, and then that leads to the same cycle. Like something I notice a lot is I think a lot of people from the golden age had kids, but they're not really fit to be parents. And again, this is another example. I'm not really trying to throw shade like that, but I do just think it's true. I think adults that I see who are parents are not really fit to be parents. I think they only got to be parents because they were born in that golden age where everything was unrealistically good and easy and the economy was unrealistically good and easy. You know what I mean? That's why they have children, because a lot of these people, if they were born nowadays, I'm sure they would not be anywhere near a child. You know what I'm saying? I hope people get what I'm saying. And I'm really not trying to have ill will about it. I just think it's true. A lot of people in my gen are not going to be able to have kids. But I'm saying if you put those people in the 1970s and then swap the people from the 70s into the 2000s, it would just totally, everything would be totally different. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to get at. I think the overabundance and just how good the system was led to so much reproduction, but reproduction from people who didn't necessarily have it in them anyway. Although, in addition to that, I mean, that's, I guess, a culminating factor. I think everybody agrees that there has been cultural decay, really regardless of whether you're on the right or the left. I think both sides would claim cultural decay. So I think that makes a lot of sense, right? I don't know. I think it's a commonly held sentiment, right? But I think it's important to think about and consider and all that stuff. But yeah, that's the truth of it. I really do think that way and feel pretty deeply about it, that a lot of people just wouldn't have the children that they have or the lifestyles that they have, and a lot of it was just luck and environmental. And I think it's insulting for people to hear, but, you know. I don't know. And like I said, maybe it's unhealthy to think that way, but I do think it's true beyond the surface. But there's a lot. I mean, there's really a lot. But what's insane, though, is, you know, us living in the information age and knowing as much as we know. And now it's stupid. It's not how we thought it was going to be. I mean, we really thought back in the 2010s and the 2000s that it would usher in, like, really good times, and it hasn't. I don't know, that was just the impression I got. But I'm not realizing, I guess, you know, a lot of people just go with the flow. They don't really think too much about things. Not everybody does a car rides with schla. Because that's the thing. I mean, I'm doing this in the hopes of it becoming a side income for sure, and honestly hopes of a main income, but I would just do this casually anyway. This is not difficult for me to record like this. I'm sure for some people they just couldn't even do it, or they'd have to try to. So what I mean to say is philosophy, language, thoughts, it's so chill to me. And I think to a lot of people it's not. It's draining for some reason. But I see a lot of the things other people engage in as draining. Playing video games, and I think the main issue with a video game is you're just boxed in with certain parameters. I think I've explained this before. When you're playing a game, you're limiting yourself within a framework. The only real good thing about a game is it's more recorded and tangible. You know, when you play with toys as a kid, there's no tangibility to it. It's just all imaginative. But when you play a game, there's real tracking. You know, you level up and you see that, and it's there, and you're putting effort into something that matters. When you play catch, no metric is tracked, or, you know, there's no proof that you did or anything like that, right? I think that's part of the reason why I like recording so much, is it's soothing to me to know that I'm getting something done while driving as opposed to just destroying a car. I think and it documents certain moments. I think, like I said, once we get hopefully to the point where there's years of this content, there's definitely going to be pretty interesting trends and changes to look at, not just in the way I talk, how I talk, the topics, but just so many things. And by then, you could just run it all through an AI, and the AI could give some crazy analysis of character development and all these things. It's going to be cool. Like, I'm happy I'm doing this. And I want it to be an income, but fortunately for the time being, I don't need it. Although I do feel like that could change at some point, so I'm trying. I feel like it's a productive hobby, but some people may debate that, I suppose. And that's valid. I don't know that it's the most productive thing, but I think what ends up happening is, and I think I've talked about this before and why I consider it work, is because it's happening during the commute to work, which I obviously wouldn't do if I didn't need to. So I count it as work. And so once you take it in those terms, it's not really a hobby. You know, it's not really a hobby. Because if it was a hobby, it would be more of a thing I would do other than now, you know, in other places and areas and whatnot. So I consider it work, but see, for me, it's not, I guess it's not work. There's never been a day. There's been days I've been a little more empty, I suppose, where I didn't really know what to say. Of course, that's happened, and I think you can tell when you watch those episodes that some of them I just don't have as much to say as, I mean, some episodes, even this one, this one's not 100%. You know, I know that clear as day. But it's not, I don't think I'm ever out of fuel enough to where I'm just not able to record. I mean, I'm always able to talk. There's always something there, even if it's small, or I think that's just how I am. That's how I'm wired. But this isn't 100%, but I think there's been some content in this episode. I felt like it's gone by pretty quickly. It's not insane, right? It's not awful. I'm not going to say you shouldn't watch it. You know, it's not that bad like some of the other episodes I've had to warn you guys, like, you know, don't watch this one, but I just think, yeah, I mean, there's usually topics to talk about. There's usually things to get into in my mind, and a lot of people aren't like that, or a lot of people need a break, but I don't know. And like I said, it's been a long time coming. Like, when I was around 14 was when I first really started to not like video games as much. I didn't like getting into new things. I didn't really like the new games that were coming out. I would just want to play old games I had already played. I became like a grandpa sooner than most people, you know what I'm saying? Like a cranky. I became a cranky grandpa a lot sooner than most. And what slowly began to replace that was auditory content. You know, I just liked listening more. And yeah, I think back then I did watch YouTube videos, but I don't think it was really about the video. I think I just liked to listen to content. And eventually I liked that more than video games, but I didn't know that at first, or when I was younger. When I was a child, I didn't really know that. I mean, I think when you're younger, and especially back then when I was younger, people just especially really young, you know, preschool, kindergarten, etc., there was always plenty of people to talk to. So I guess I liked talking, but I never thought about it. It wasn't until I got older where you start to, like, that framework is gone. The system of having people around a lot vanishes a little bit as you get older. And then you notice it. Then I started to feel lonely. But then I discovered that I like listening to content more than playing a video game. I just prefer it as a preference. Thinking about concepts and that's what I do now mainly, you know. And so that's why I think I don't like games, because it seems too limited. It doesn't seem like there's much philosophically going on. And when I do like to watch TV shows, or I do like to play video games, that tends to be the framework with which I interpret and look at them. That tends to be it. Is I look at it through that lens. So I think that's an important distinction. You know, a lot of people watch TV and may have zero thoughts really about it, or then you have people who have thoughts about it, but it's thoughts about the show within the show. And then I guess you have people like me that like to just think about maybe the reasoning behind why they had certain characters say certain lines, or a greater thematic lesson that could be hidden, or different ways of interpreting the media. You know, there's like all different kinds of levels, I think, to how people consume content. And obviously I'm at the noisier levels. So I always like noise. I always have. I just didn't realize it until I got older. And then it's hard to play a video game because it just feels like a contained medium. You know, when I'm talking, it's like a blank canvas. I'm able to paint and use whatever tools I want. But a video game is like, here's a crayon and here's a piece of paper, but you only have a red crayon. So that's why I don't understand. Now, I think they've tried to mitigate this with open world games and things like that, but I still don't think you can make a game truly open-ended ever. And really nothing is open-ended besides speech. I would say that speech is the only thing that is truly completely open-ended, meaning there's no limitation as long as you have the vocabulary that you want to have. And you're able to explain things in a way you want to, but I guess that's the kicker. Most people can't do that. And I think that's something that's a little bit hard for me to figure out. I mean, on this show, it's recorded. There's been a few times I haven't been able to find the perfect word for what I'm trying to convey. But it's not common. It's not something that happens often. And when it does happen, it doesn't really faze me too much. It's just fine. Because it happens minimally, and then I can usually, since the rest of the things I've been saying were coherent enough, you're able to kind of either, well, I'd hope as the listener you're able to bridge the gap, but in my mind I can kind of bridge the gap and make it work. But like I said, it's just so easy to be silent nowadays too. I think we've talked about that. In terms of generation, especially verbal generation, most people aren't absorbing much. In terms of listening, I think people absorb a lot though. And I guess it remains to be seen the effects that has on the brain. But if you can't really remember the things that you've heard beyond little snippets of trends that you'll forget about in a couple years, I'm not really sure what the point of that is. You obviously have to be able to hold thoughts and beliefs tangibly. And I think we talked about that recently, how it's really impossible to know yourself if you can't hold like a 20-minute long thought at least. Because if you're switching around thoughts, or if your brain's wired to just switch, that's just not, you're not going to be able to understand anybody. You're not going to be able to understand yourself. That's what I'm afraid we're heading to. I really wonder about things. I guess I was pretty optimistic. Then obviously I was kind of down in the dumps. Now today I'm feeling a little more optimistic, I suppose, but it's because things are chill. You know what I mean? Things are chill. For the time being. But I don't know how they're going to end up. Like, I was really confident at the future. Those couple episodes, I'm glad it's recorded. Because when I have those mood swings, it's really fun. It's very exciting. But then it's just like, I don't know. And then I'm in retrospect, I'm like, what was I even on about? Like, I don't know. I don't think about it. You know, but I wish it was like that all the time. I mean, maybe it's nice to have downswings, but I think if and once I have some kind of audience, that might change things, right? It may actually, it may make it so it's an always on kind. I actually can't believe it's already been 39 minutes. I guess traffic was worse than I thought. This conversation, though, it's just entertained me. And I don't think it's been great, but the fact that time, like, I feel fine. I don't know, so it must not have been that bad if I'm not noticing how late it is. Because sometimes I do. But it's weird. This was a weird conversation, right? Because I don't think it was good, but at the same time, maybe that'll be an advantage of me too. Because a lot of people who listen, I don't even know that it matters the contents of the words. I think there may be a subset of my audience that would just like to listen to me for the familiarity and the consistency. Because there's not a lot of people who are uploading as much as me, so I think for certain people, it's just a chill thing to have running and not even listen to anything that I'm saying. And I think that could be the subset or a subset of the audience into the future. Because in the future, I think people may want to be stimulated, but they may not necessarily understand the things I'm saying. And that's cool. I mean, I'm very offended by it, but it's cool. Because I'm assuming it's something I'm going to have to come to terms with, because I don't see how that isn't going to be the case. A lot of people could see my conversations as white noise, I think. And the consistency is what matters. And you know what? Someday we'll get to more than 5 to 6 hours, Because I'm telling you, I would just stream all the time if I could. All the time, man. That's all I would do. I would be streaming so much if I didn't work. Hopefully, I mean, it's the dream, right? It is the dream. Well, anyways, it has been schla, but now it's time to buy schla. So, see ya, schla.